Heavenly Father, I pray for everyone watching this video right now. May you bless them with peace, joy, and breakthroughs in their lives. Amen. Hello, my wonderful family. I am so glad and grateful to have you here with me today. Your support means the world, and I truly don't take it for granted. Before we dive into today's powerful story, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and of course, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update from this channel. I want a divorce. David Morrison's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup, the words hitting him like a physical blow. Across their breakfast table, Rachel's voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel, her wedding ring already absent from her finger. Rachel, we can. No. Her eyes, once filled with the warmth that had made him fall in love 15 years ago, now held nothing but exhaustion. I've already contacted Peterson and Associates. The papers will be ready by Friday. David's mind raced through calculations. Not business projections this time, but the devastating arithmetic of a life falling apart. 15 years of marriage. 2 kids who would be shattered. A company built on the foundation of their partnership that would crumble if word got out about the divorce. But something else cut deeper than all of that. The realization that he'd been so focused on building their empire that he'd completely missed the demolition of their foundation. The timing, he started. The timing is never going to be right for you, David. That's the problem. Rachel stood, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor of their kitchen. Especially not with the Blackstone deal closing next week. His blood went cold. The Blackstone acquisition was supposed to be confidential. Board members only. How did she know about it? Rachel paused at the doorway, her shoulders set with a determination he recognized from the early days when they'd built Morrison Enterprises together from nothing. I know about all of it, David. The late meetings that weren't meetings. The business trips that weren't business. The phone calls you take in the garage because you think I can't hear you. The coffee cup slipped from his numb fingers, shattering against the floor. And I know about her. The silence that followed felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing devastation was circling just beyond the stillness. Rachel. But she was already gone, her footsteps echoing up the stairs, leaving David alone with the broken porcelain and the wreckage of his life. Welcome to a story about the most expensive lesson money can't buy. That success means nothing if you lose the person who made it all worthwhile. This is the journey of how 2 people found their way back to each other when everything seemed lost. David stared at the shattered cup, his reflection fractured in the scattered pieces. In 6 months, Morrison Enterprises would go public, making him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. But what good was building an empire if you had no one to share it with? His phone buzzed against the granite countertop. Another text from the number he'd been dreading. Meet me tonight. We need to talk about us. S. He deleted it immediately, but the damage was already done. Rachel had seen the texts. She knew about Sophia, his business partner in the European expansion. She knew about the stolen moments, the emotional affair that had started as strategy sessions and evolved into something that threatened everything he'd built. But there was something Rachel didn't know. Something that made this betrayal infinitely worse. The kitchen door swung open, and their housekeeper Carmen entered, stopping short when she saw the broken cup. Mr. Morrison? Is everything? Carmen. His voice sounded foreign to his own ears. Did Mrs. Morrison leave any instructions? About the children? Carmen's face crumpled with sympathy. She asked me to pick up Emma and Tyler from school today. Said she needed to handle some business. David nodded, pieces of his world clicking into place with horrible clarity. Rachel wasn't just leaving him. She was preparing for war. His phone rang. Robert Chin, his CFO and oldest friend. David, we have a problem. Someone leaked the Blackstone numbers to the Journal. They're running the story in tomorrow's edition. The room seemed to tilt. If the acquisition leaked before the official announcement, the SEC would launch an investigation. Stock prices would tank. Everything they'd worked for would collapse. How bad? Career-ending bad. Unless. Robert's pause carried weight. Unless we can prove the leak came from inside Blackstone, not Morrison Enterprises. David's hand trembled as he set the phone down. The investigation would expose everything. Every transaction, every communication, every secret he'd been keeping. Including the one that would destroy not just his marriage, but his entire family. He walked to his home office, each step feeling like walking toward his own execution. On his desk sat a framed photo from their wedding day, Rachel radiant in white, him looking at her like she was his entire world. Which she had been, until ambition convinced him he needed more. But beneath that frame, hidden in the locked drawer only he could access, lay the real bomb that would detonate his life. The DNA test results he'd received 3 weeks ago. The ones that proved Tyler, their 8-year-old son, the child Rachel had carried for 9 months believing he was David's, belonged to someone else entirely. Someone whose identity would shatter more than just their marriage when the truth finally emerged. David's hands shook as he opened the drawer, staring at the document that held the power to destroy 3 families instead of just one. Because Tyler's biological father wasn't some anonymous donor or forgotten fling. It was James Blackstone, the man whose company David was about to acquire. The man whose trust had built their business relationship. The man whose friendship had been the foundation of the biggest deal of David's career. The man who had no idea he had a son. As sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer to their neighborhood, David realized that Rachel's demand for a divorce was just the beginning. The DNA results, the leaked acquisition, the SEC investigation, and Sophia's increasingly desperate texts weren't separate crises. They were all connected, and someone was orchestrating his complete destruction. What devastating revelation awaits as David's world collapses? Will he find the strength to fight for his marriage when the truth threatens to destroy everything he's built? This is a story about the price of success and the power of love to overcome the impossible. The sirens weren't coming for him, yet. David watched through his office window as emergency vehicles raced past their gated community toward some other family's crisis. But the sound triggered a memory that made his chest tighten with a different kind of pain. 15 years ago, those same sirens had brought Rachel into his life. He'd been working late at his tiny startup office when the ambulance screamed past, carrying his business partner to the hospital after a heart attack. At 28, David Morrison had been 3 months away from bankruptcy, his revolutionary logistics software worthless without the connections his partner had promised. He'd sat in that empty office, staring at eviction notices, wondering if his father had been right about him being a dreamer destined for failure. Then Rachel Stevens had walked through his door. "I hear you need an investor," she'd said, rain dripping from her dark hair, her clothes still wrinkled from rushing out of her corporate law job. "And I need a way out of representing people I don't believe in." She'd been James Blackstone's corporate attorney then, brilliant but suffocating under the weight of covering up her boss's questionable business practices. David's software could revolutionize supply chain management, she'd told him, but only if he was willing to play the game differently than everyone else. Differently how? He'd asked. By actually caring about the people our success affects. By building something that matters. They'd shaken hands that night, and David had felt electricity shoot through his entire body. Not just attraction, though Rachel Stevens was stunning in a way that made him forget how to speak, but recognition. She saw the same future he did, believed in the same impossible dream. 3 months later, Morrison Enterprises had its first major client. 6 months after that, David had proposed. Not because the business was thriving, but because he couldn't imagine building anything without her. Now, staring at the DNA results that proved his marriage was built on a lie, David remembered the exact moment everything started unraveling. It was 3 years ago, at James Blackstone's Christmas party. Rachel had been networking with potential European partners, while David closed a deal that would expand their operations internationally. They were at the peak of their success, drunk on possibility and each other's presence. Then James had pulled David aside. "You know, Morrison, watching you and Rachel tonight, it reminds me of what I lost." James's voice had carried an unusual vulnerability. "My wife left me because I chose business over family. Don't make my mistakes." David had laughed it off then, confident in his ability to balance everything. But later that night, he'd found Rachel and James deep in conversation by the fireplace, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing at some private joke. "What were you two talking about?" David had asked as they drove home. "Business strategy," Rachel had replied, but something in her tone felt off. "James has some interesting insights about the European market." David had pushed the moment from his mind, focused on the expansion deals that would make them rich beyond imagination. He'd missed the way Rachel started working late on Blackstone consultation projects. Missed how she'd begun deflecting his questions about her whereabouts. Missed the subtle changes in her energy when James's name came up. He'd been so busy building their empire that he'd failed to notice his wife was falling for another man. But there was something else he'd missed. Something that made Tyler's paternity feel like more than just betrayal. It felt like destiny catching up with him. His phone rang, jolting him from the memory. Robert Chen's name flashed on the screen. "David, where are you? James Blackstone is here demanding to see you immediately. He looks ready to burn the building down." David's blood went cold. James knew. Somehow, he'd found out about Tyler. "Stall him. I'll be there in 20 minutes. David, there's something else. Sophia's here too. She's in your office and she's crying." The world seemed to shift beneath David's feet. Sophia had promised to keep their relationship quiet until after the acquisition. Her presence at Morrison Enterprises, especially today, could only mean one thing. Someone had forced her hand. David grabbed his keys, then stopped. The DNA results lay open on his desk, Tyler's smiling face staring up at him from the attached school photo. His son, because Tyler was his son in every way that mattered, had Rachel's eyes and James's stubborn chin. How had he never noticed? But more importantly, how had someone else noticed enough to order the DNA test that had shattered David's world? The test he'd never requested. The results that had been anonymously mailed to his office with a note. "Thought you should know the truth about your perfect family. More revelations coming soon." Someone was systematically destroying his life, piece by carefully orchestrated piece. The leaked acquisition, the DNA test, and now James and Sophia's simultaneous arrival at his office. None of this was coincidence. David's hands shook as he dialed Rachel's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Rachel, I know you're angry, but something's happening. Something bigger than our marriage problems. Please call me back. Please." As he hung up, another memory surfaced. One that made his stomach clench with a different kind of dread. 2 weeks ago, their daughter Emma had mentioned something strange. A man had been asking questions about their family at her school, claiming to be writing a story about successful entrepreneurs. The school had turned him away, but Emma had overheard him asking specifically about Tyler's birth records. David had dismissed it as tabloid fishing, but now? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "By now you've realized someone knows all your secrets." The DNA test was just the beginning. "If you want to save what's left of your family, meet me at the Riverside Cemetery tonight at midnight. Come alone, or everyone you love pays the price. A friend who knows the truth." David stared at the message, his mind racing through possibilities. Who could have orchestrated this level of surveillance? Who had access to their most private information? Who would benefit from destroying the Morrison-Blackstone deal? Then it hit him with sickening clarity. The only person who knew about his relationship with Sophia, about Rachel's late-night meetings with James, about the timing of Tyler's conception, and about the Blackstone acquisition details was someone who'd been in their inner circle from the beginning. Someone they'd trusted completely. Someone who'd had access to their home, their business, their children. David's hands trembled as he scrolled through his contacts, stopping at a name that made his blood run cold. Carmen Rodriguez. Their housekeeper for 8 years. The woman who'd comforted their children through nightmares, who'd cleaned up after their arguments, who'd been present for every private conversation in their home. The woman whose sister Maria worked as James Blackstone's personal assistant. The woman whose brother-in-law was Peterson, the divorce attorney Rachel had contacted. The woman who just volunteered to pick up Emma and Tyler from school on the day their world was falling apart. David's phone rang. Rachel's number. "David." Her voice was shaking. "Emma and Tyler. Carmen never picked them up from school. They're missing." The web of betrayal tightens as David realizes their most trusted ally may be their greatest enemy. With his children missing and his marriage in ruins, will he find the strength to fight for his family? The devastating truth about who's been pulling the strings is about to emerge. How long? David's voice cracked as he gripped the phone, Rachel's panicked breathing filling the silence between them. The school called 20 minutes ago. Carmen was supposed to pick them up at 3:30. "It's almost 5 o'clock now, David. Where are our babies?" David was already in his car, tires squealing as he reversed out of their driveway. "I'm coming to get you. Don't call the police yet. Don't call the David, our children are missing." "Rachel, listen to me." Carmen didn't just forget. "This is connected to everything else that's happening. If we involve the police now, before we understand what we're dealing with, Emma and Tyler could." He couldn't finish the sentence. The drive to Rachel's lawyer's office took 12 minutes that felt like hours. David's mind raced through every interaction with Carmen, every seemingly innocent question she'd asked about their schedules, their business meetings, their private conversations. 8 years of trust, weaponized against them. Rachel was waiting on the sidewalk, her composed lawyer facade cracked completely. The moment she saw David's car, she ran toward it, tears streaming down her face. For a heartbeat, seeing her rush toward him like that, David felt the ghost of what they used to be. "Any word?" he asked as she slammed the passenger door. "Nothing. I've called her cell 20 times. I drove to her apartment. No one's seen her since yesterday." Rachel's hands shook as she fastened her seatbelt. "David, what if? They're alive." His voice carried more conviction than he felt. "This isn't random violence. Someone's orchestrating this, which means they need Emma and Tyler for leverage." "Leverage for what?" David's jaw tightened. This was it, the moment he had to choose between protecting his secrets and protecting his family. There was no path forward that didn't involve devastating consequences. The Blackstone acquisition isn't just business, Rachel. It's personal. And someone knows secrets that could destroy more than just our marriage. Rachel stared at him, her lawyer's instincts kicking in despite her panic. "What kind of secrets?" Before David could answer, his phone rang. "James Blackstone." "Morrison, where the hell are you? I've been waiting in your office for an hour, and your CFO keeps feeding me bullshit about traffic. We need to talk about the leak, and we need to talk now." David looked at Rachel, seeing his own realization reflected in her eyes. James didn't know about Tyler. If he was here demanding answers about the financial leak, it meant the DNA bombshell hadn't exploded yet. "James, I'm dealing with a family emergency. Can we?" "Family emergency?" James's voice sharpened. "What kind of family emergency?" The question carried undertones that made David's blood run cold. There was something in James's tone, not surprise but recognition, as if he'd been expecting this call. "James," David said slowly, "where are you right now?" "Your office, like I said." "Why?" Rachel grabbed David's arm, pointing to the Morrison Enterprises building visible in the distance. The executive parking lot was empty. James's distinctive black sedan was nowhere to be seen. "David," Rachel whispered, "he's lying." The phone went silent for several seconds. When James spoke again, his voice had changed completely. "Impressive, Morrison. You're finally paying attention." The friendly business partner was gone, replaced by someone David didn't recognize. "Though I have to say, it took you long enough to notice Carmen's little inconsistencies." 8 years, David. 8 years of her reporting back to me about your every move." Rachel's face went white. "You son of a bitch. Where are our children?" "Our children?" James's laugh was cold. "Interesting choice of words, Rachel. Considering Tyler isn't David's son." The car swerved as David's hands spasmed on the steering wheel. Rachel gasped, turning to stare at him with dawning horror. "You knew," she breathed. "You already knew." David pulled into an empty parking lot, his hands trembling. "The DNA test came 3 weeks ago. Anonymous. I thought someone was trying to destroy us, but I never suspected." "James." Rachel's voice was deadly quiet. "Tyler is your son." "Biologically, yes. But that's not why I took your children." James's voice carried no emotion now, pure business calculation. "This was never about Tyler's parentage, though that makes excellent leverage. This is about 15 years of you two stealing what should have been mine." David's mind reeled. "Stealing what?" "We built Morrison Enterprises from nothing. With my technology, David. The logistics software you've built your empire on? I designed the core algorithms 5 years before you even started your company." Rachel knew this when she convinced you to pivot your original concept. Rachel's face crumpled. "James, you said those algorithms were open source. You said. I said a lot of things to the woman I was in love with. The woman who was supposed to leave her ambitious young boyfriend and build something real with me." James's voice turned bitter. "Instead, you stole my life's work and handed it to him." David felt the final piece click into place. The late-night strategy sessions between Rachel and James hadn't been an affair. They'd been theft. Rachel had been feeding James's proprietary technology to David, thinking she was using publicly available information. "But that doesn't explain Tyler," Rachel said, her voice breaking. "Tyler was my last attempt to win you back. That night at the Christmas party 3 years ago, when David was too busy networking to notice his wife was falling apart from the guilt of what she'd done. You came to me for comfort. You said you couldn't live with the lies anymore." Rachel buried her face in her hands. "I was going to confess everything to David. About the technology, about my feelings for you, about how I'd compromised everything we'd built. But you didn't confess, did you? You went home to your husband and pretended nothing had happened. And 9 months later, you gave birth to my son and let David believe he was the father." David's world tilted. The affair he'd imagined was real, but it wasn't recent. It was 3 years ago, a moment of weakness that had created Tyler. And Rachel had been carrying the guilt ever since. "Where are my children, James?" David's voice was steel. "Somewhere safe. For now. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to transfer complete ownership of Morrison Enterprises to me, along with $50 million in liquid assets as compensation for 15 years of stolen profits. In return, I'll disappear from your lives forever. And if we refuse, then the world learns that Morrison Enterprises was built on stolen technology. Your stock price collapses. The SEC investigation destroys whatever's left. And Emma and Tyler. Well, let's just say accidents happen to children whose parents make poor choices." Rachel grabbed the phone from David's hand. "James, please. Whatever you think we did to you, Emma and Tyler are innocent. They're babies. Tyler is my baby. And he deserves better than parents who built their entire lives on lies." James's voice softened slightly. "I'm not a monster, Rachel. I'm offering you a choice. Give me what's mine, and you can keep your family together. Refuse and lose everything anyway." The line went dead. David and Rachel sat in silence for several heartbeats, the magnitude of their situation crushing down on them. 15 years of marriage built on stolen technology and hidden guilt. 2 children missing because of choices they'd made before they fully understood the consequences. A man they'd both trusted who had spent nearly a decade orchestrating their destruction. "David," Rachel whispered, "there's something else I never told you." He looked at her, wondering what other revelations could possibly matter now. "The night Tyler was conceived, I wasn't just guilty about the technology theft. I was planning to leave you." Tears streamed down her face. "I had already packed my bags. I was going to confess everything and ask James to help me start over somewhere else." "What changed your mind?" "You did. You came home that night and found me crying in our bedroom. And instead of demanding explanations, you just held me. You said that whatever was wrong, we'd face it together. That you'd rather lose everything than lose me." She touched his face gently. "I realized in that moment that I didn't want to start over with James. I wanted to find my way back to you." David felt something crack open in his chest, not breaking, but opening. "Rachel, I'm so sorry. For Sophia, for missing what you were going through, for letting my ambition." "We can blame ourselves later," Rachel interrupted, her lawyer instincts surfacing. "Right now, we need to save our children. Both of them." David nodded, understanding flowing between them. Whatever mistakes they'd made, whatever betrayals they'd committed against each other, Emma and Tyler were innocent. And they would move heaven and earth to bring them home. "James wants Morrison Enterprises," David said, his mind already calculating. "But he made one mistake." "What's that?" "He assumes I won't sacrifice everything to protect my family." David started the car, his jaw set with grim determination. He's about to learn that some things matter more than business empires. As they drove toward an uncertain confrontation with the man who held their children's lives in his hands, David realized that this crisis had done something unexpected. For the first time in years, he and Rachel were fighting for the same thing. And that made them dangerous. The stakes have never been higher as David and Rachel face an impossible choice: sacrifice their empire or lose their children forever. But James Blackstone has underestimated the power of parents who will stop at nothing to protect their family. The real battle is just beginning. The Morrison Enterprises building looked different in the dying light. Less like the monument to their success David had always seen, more like a tomb for their shattered dreams. As they pulled into the executive parking lot, Rachel's phone buzzed with a text message. "It's from Carmen's number," she said, her voice tight. "Emma and Tyler are safe and asking for Mommy. Send David to the office alone for further instructions. Any police involvement, and you'll never see them again." David turned off the engine, his hands still gripping the wheel. "He's separating us. Classic manipulation tactic. Then we don't let him." Rachel's legal training was kicking in, her panic crystallizing into strategic thinking. "James needs something from you that he can't just take. Otherwise, he would have already transferred the company assets himself." David nodded slowly. "The acquisition contracts. They require my biometric signature and Rachel Morrison's co-approval as primary stakeholder." He looked at her with grim realization. He needs both of us to sign willingly, or the transfer won't hold up under legal scrutiny. Rachel's phone rang. "Unknown number." "Put it on speaker," David said. "Smart thinking, both of you." James's voice filled the car. "But not smart enough." "Rachel, I'm sending you an address. You have 20 minutes to get there. David goes to the office. Anyone deviates from these instructions, and your children disappear permanently. James, please. 20 minutes, Rachel. Don't disappoint me again. The line went dead. Rachel's phone chimed with an address across town. The old industrial district where Morrison Enterprises had started 15 years ago. It's the original warehouse, she whispered. Where we had our first office. David felt a chill of recognition. The place where they'd fallen in love, where they'd built their dreams, where they'd made love on the floor after signing their first major contract. James was forcing them to confront the foundation of everything they'd built together. David, this feels wrong. What if it's a trap? Everything about this is a trap. David cupped her face in his hands, studying the woman he'd somehow lost sight of over the years. But Rachel, whatever happens tonight, I need you to know something. Tyler may not be my biological son, but he's my boy. Emma is my girl. You're my wife. And I will burn down everything I've ever built to bring them home safe. For a moment, the years of distance between them collapsed. Rachel leaned into his touch, and David remembered what it felt like to be her partner instead of her business associate. I love you, she whispered. I never stopped, even when I was so angry I could barely look at you. Even when I was planning to leave. I love you too. And when this is over, we're going to figure out how to find our way back to each other. They kissed then, desperate and fierce, tasting salt from tears they hadn't realized they were shedding. For 15 seconds, they weren't two people whose lives were falling apart. They were David and Rachel Morrison, the couple who had conquered the world together. Then reality crashed back. Go, Rachel said, pulling away. Whatever James wants, give it to him. The company, the money, everything. Nothing matters but Emma and Tyler. David nodded, watching her drive away before entering the building that had once been his greatest pride. The lobby felt cavernous and cold, his footsteps echoing off marble floors that had cost more than most people's houses. The elevator to the executive floor moved with agonizing slowness. When the doors opened, David found his office exactly as he'd left it that morning, except for Sophia Martinez sitting behind his desk, her face streaked with tears. David, thank God. She stood, rushing toward him. Someone's been threatening me. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd destroy my career and... Sophia, slow down. David caught her hands, his mind racing. Who's been threatening you? I don't know. Anonymous calls, emails, text messages. They knew about us, about our relationship. They said unless I came here tonight and helped them, they'd send recordings of our phone conversations to Rachel and the board of directors. David's blood went cold. What recordings? Sophia's face crumpled. The calls we had last month, when you were struggling with your marriage, and I was helping you work through your feelings. David, they edited them to make it sound like we were planning to leave our spouses and run away together. But we never. I know that. You know that. But edited properly, those conversations sound like proof of an affair that never happened. Sophia pulled out her phone, playing an audio clip that made David's stomach drop. His own voice filled the office. I can't keep living this lie, Sophia. I need to be with someone who understands me. Sophia's voice responded. Then leave her, David. Choose happiness. Choose us. David stared at the phone in horror. He remembered that conversation. He'd been talking about leaving his father's negative voice out of his head, and Sophia had been encouraging him to choose happiness over self-doubt. But edited together, it sounded like a man planning to abandon his wife for his mistress. How many of these do they have? Dozens. All edited to sound like we've been having an affair for months. Sophia's hands shook. David, I'm married too. If these get out, my husband will leave me. My children will think their mother is. We'll figure this out, David said, though his mind was reeling. Someone had been surveilling them for months, recording private conversations, building a case against them that could destroy both their families. His desk phone rang. David answered on speaker. Touching reunion. James's voice was cold with satisfaction. I hope you enjoyed your little moment with your mistress, David. Because Rachel just heard every word. David's heart stopped. What are you talking about? The warehouse has excellent acoustics. And Rachel arrived just in time to hear the audio evidence of your affair. She's quite upset. That audio is fake. Edited lies. Try explaining that to your wife. She's already heard enough to know that Sophia is the woman you've been meeting with for months. The woman you've been confiding in about your marriage problems. The woman you chose to trust with your deepest feelings instead of your own wife. David felt the walls closing in. Even if the affair wasn't physical, the emotional betrayal was real. He had been turning to Sophia instead of Rachel. He had been sharing his struggles with another woman while shutting out his wife. James, I'll give you whatever you want. Just let me talk to Rachel. Let me explain. Oh, you'll get your chance to explain. But first, you're going to sign some documents. Sophia has been very helpful in preparing them. David turned to Sophia, seeing her face pale with realization. I'm sorry, David. They said they'd destroy my family if I didn't help them. I didn't know what else to do. What documents, Sophia? She pulled a folder from David's desk drawer, her hands trembling. Transfer papers for Morrison Enterprises. And a confession. Confession to what? Securities fraud. Tax evasion. Embezzlement of funds meant for employee pension plans. Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. They have evidence, David. Falsified documents that show you've been stealing from your own employees for years. David's knees nearly buckled. Those are lies. We've never. The evidence is very convincing. Bank transfers, falsified audit reports, communication records. All backdated to look like they've been happening since the company went public. Sophia met his eyes, her expression desperate. David, I know it's not real. But they'll never be able to prove that in court. By the time investigators sort through all the fabricated evidence, you'll be in prison and Morrison Enterprises will be worthless. The office door opened and Robert Chen walked in, his face grave. David, we have a problem. The SEC just raided our accounting offices. They have a warrant based on whistleblower testimony about financial irregularities. Robert's voice was strained. They've frozen all company assets pending investigation. David felt the room spinning. Who was the whistleblower? Robert's silence was answer enough. Carmen, David breathed. 8 years of access to our files, our computers, our private conversations. She didn't just spy on our personal lives. She helped fabricate evidence of financial crimes. His phone buzzed with a text from Rachel's number. I heard everything. The affair, the lies, the criminal charges. How could you do this to us? To our children. David tried calling her back, but it went straight to voicemail. Another text. Don't try to contact me. I'm done being your fool. Then, from James's number. Congratulations, Morrison. You've lost your wife, your company, and your freedom. Unless, of course, you'd like to make a deal. David stared at the confession documents spread across his desk. If he signed them, he'd be admitting to crimes he'd never committed. If he didn't sign them, the fabricated evidence would destroy him anyway, and Rachel would never forgive him for the emotional affair with Sophia. What kind of deal? He typed back. Sign the confession and the transfer papers. I take responsibility for the financial crimes as the new owner, making them disappear. You go to minimum security prison for 2 years on a reduced charge. Rachel and the children get to keep their home and a small trust fund. David looked at Sophia, then at Robert, seeing his own desperation reflected in their faces. And if I refuse? Federal prison for 20 years. Rachel loses everything and has to raise the children in poverty while their father is branded a criminal. Oh, and those recordings of your affair get released to every major news outlet. The phone rang again. This time it was Rachel's voice, broken and raw. David, please. Just sign whatever he wants. I can't lose you and our children. I can't do this alone. David closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices crushing down on him. Sign the confession and lose his freedom, but save his family's future. Refuse and lose everything anyway while destroying the people he loved most. But there was something James hadn't counted on. David Morrison hadn't built a business empire by accepting impossible choices. He built it by finding third options that nobody else could see. And he was about to show James Blackstone that some wars couldn't be won by playing by the enemy's rules. Trapped in a web of fabricated evidence and emotional manipulation, David faces an impossible choice that will determine the fate of his family. But sometimes the only way to win an unwinnable game is to change the rules entirely. The darkest hour approaches, but dawn might be closer than anyone realizes. David stared at the confession papers, his pen hovering over the signature line that would destroy his life. But something nagged at him, a detail that didn't fit the narrative James had constructed. Sophia, he said quietly. When exactly did they first contact you about helping them? 3 weeks ago, right after you got those DNA test results. She paused, realization dawning in her eyes. David, how did they know you'd received them? You said they came anonymously. David's blood went cold. Only 3 people knew about the DNA test, himself, the lab technician, and Rachel, he whispered. His phone buzzed with another message from his wife. David, I'm scared. James is getting angry. Please just sign the papers. I can't lose our babies. But David was studying the message timestamp, cross-referencing it with his memory of when Rachel had driven away. The text had been sent from across town, but the timestamp showed it was sent before she could possibly have reached the warehouse. Robert, David said slowly, pull up the building's security feed from today. David, this isn't the time. Pull it up. Now. Robert's fingers flew across his laptop keyboard. The screen filled with multiple camera angles from throughout the day. David fast-forwarded to 5:47 p.m., when Rachel had supposedly driven away to meet James. The parking lot footage showed Rachel's car leaving the building. But camera 3, which covered the exit route, told a different story. Rachel's car had circled the block and returned to Morrison Enterprises through the service entrance. She'd never left the building. She's been here the whole time, David breathed. The warehouse, the separation, the desperate phone calls, it's all theater. Sophia gasped. David, if Rachel's been here, then who? The office door opened, and Rachel walked in, her distressed expression melting away like a mask being removed. Behind her walked James Blackstone, no longer playing the role of vengeful business partner. Hello, darling, Rachel said, her voice carrying none of the panic from their phone calls. Took you long enough to figure it out. David felt reality shift beneath his feet. Rachel, what? 15 years, David. 15 years of playing the devoted wife to a man who was too arrogant to see what was happening right in front of his face. Rachel moved to James's side, their body language suddenly, obviously intimate in a way that spoke of years, not moments. The technology theft, the emotional affair, Tyler's paternity, all of it was real. But you've got the timeline completely wrong. James smiled coldly. We've been together since before you met her, Morrison. Rachel was my attorney, yes. But she was also my fiancée. David's world tilted. That's impossible. You introduced us. I introduced you because James needed someone to front his stolen technology, Rachel said matter-of-factly. Someone ambitious enough to build a company around it, but naive enough to never question the source code. Someone who would fall completely in love and never suspect his wife was feeding information to her real partner. The confession papers slipped from David's numb fingers. Tyler is James's son, yes. But not from 3 years ago, David. Tyler is 9 years old. Do the math. David's knees buckled. Tyler wasn't conceived during a moment of weakness after years of marriage. He'd been conceived before David and Rachel's wedding. During their engagement. Every major business decision you made, every expansion, every acquisition, I fed it all to James first. Morrison Enterprises succeeded because you were following our roadmap, not creating your own. Rachel's voice carried the satisfaction of a chess player revealing checkmate. We've been building our fortune through your company while you played the grateful husband. Sophia backed toward the door, her face pale with horror. David, I'm so sorry. I never knew. Oh, but you did know, Sophia. Rachel turned toward her with predatory interest. You knew that David was an easy mark for a beautiful woman with business problems. You knew that suggesting the European expansion would play perfectly into his ego. You knew that getting close to him would give us the perfect leverage when we needed it. Sophia's face went white. No, I was protecting my family. They threatened my children. Your children were never in danger, James said coldly. But your husband received some very interesting photos of you and David in compromising situations. Fabricated, of course, but convincing enough to destroy your marriage if he ever saw them. David watched Sophia crumble as the final piece clicked into place. You've been working with them the whole time. I never had a choice, Sophia cried. They had evidence of things I never did, photos of meetings that were manipulated to look like affairs. My husband already suspected something because of how much time I was spending with you. I had to cooperate or lose my family. Just like we manipulated you, David, Rachel said gently, almost lovingly. The security cameras in your home office, the keyloggers on your computer, the listening devices Carmen installed while cleaning your house. We knew about every private conversation, every moment of doubt, every time you questioned whether your marriage was real. David's breathing became labored. The woman he'd loved for 15 years, the mother of his children, the partner he'd built his life around. She'd been a lie from the beginning. Emma, he whispered. Is Emma even mine? For the first time, Rachel's composure cracked slightly. Emma is yours. That part was unplanned. But you love her, David said desperately. I've seen you with her. The way you protected her, cared for her. Of course I love her. She's my daughter. Rachel's voice softened with genuine emotion. David, just because our marriage was originally strategic, doesn't mean I never developed real feelings. You're a good man. A loving father. If things had been different. But they weren't different, James interrupted coldly. Rachel had a job to do. A debt to pay. David's head snapped up. What debt? Rachel and James exchanged a look that carried years of shared secrets. Tell him, James said. He's earned the right to know. Rachel took a shaky breath. My father embezzled $3 million from James's company 12 years ago. When he was caught, James offered a deal, prison for my father, or I work off the debt by helping build a business empire we could eventually claim. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with devastating clarity. You never had a choice, David realized. From the moment we met, you were trapped. I was trapped, Rachel agreed. But David, somewhere along the way, I started hoping the trap would become real. That maybe we could find a way to. Enough, James snapped. You've had 15 years to play house, Rachel. It's time to finish this. Rachel flinched at his tone, and David saw something he'd missed before. The way she unconsciously stepped away from James when he spoke harshly. The way her hands trembled when he looked at her with displeasure. The way she glanced toward the door as if calculating escape routes. Rachel wasn't James's partner. She was his prisoner. Where are Emma and Tyler? David asked quietly. Safe, James replied. And they'll stay safe as long as you sign those papers. And if I sign them? What happens to Rachel? James smiled coldly. Rachel has served her purpose. She'll disappear, along with any evidence of our arrangement. You'll go to prison believing your wife was a master manipulator who never loved you. The children will be raised by their Uncle James, who stepped in to help after their parents' tragic downfall. David saw Rachel's face go white with horror. James, that wasn't the deal. You said. I said a lot of things, darling. Just like you said a lot of things to David over the years. James's mask slipped completely, revealing the cold predator beneath. Did you really think I'd let you walk away from this with a happy ending? You know too much. You've always known too much. Rachel backed toward David instinctively, her 15-year performance finally cracking under the weight of genuine terror. David, she whispered, I know I have no right to ask, but please. Where are our children, Rachel? The warehouse. They're really there, with Carmen. But David, James never intended to let any of us walk away from this alive. David felt something click into place. Not puzzle pieces, but resolve hardening into steel. The woman standing before him might have been living a lie, but her terror for their children was real. Her love for Emma was real. And despite everything, the way she'd instinctively moved toward him for protection suggested that somewhere beneath 15 years of deception, something authentic had grown. James, David said quietly, you made one critical mistake. And what's that? You assumed I'd be broken by learning the truth about my marriage. David reached for Rachel's hand, feeling her fingers intertwine with his. But all you've done is show me what my wife sacrificed to protect her family. 15 years of living a lie to save her father. 15 years of building something real out of something fake. David pulled Rachel closer, looking into her eyes. And you showed me that the woman I fell in love with was fighting to love me back, even when everything in her world told her not to. James laughed harshly. How touching. Romeo and Juliet, reunited in mutual destruction. No, David said, his voice carrying the authority that had built a business empire. David and Rachel Morrison, fighting together for the first time in 15 years. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, tasting tears and determination and 15 years of suppressed truth. When they broke apart, Rachel was looking at him with something he hadn't seen in years. Hope. So what's it going to be, Morrison? James demanded. Sign the papers or watch your family burn? David picked up his pen, Rachel's hand still in his, and smiled with the dangerous confidence of a man who just remembered exactly who he was. I've got a better idea. He devastating truth about their marriage has been revealed, but instead of destroying David and Rachel, it's finally united them against their real enemy. With their children in danger and James holding all the cards, can they find a way to turn 15 years of deception into their greatest strength? The impossible choice is about to become a declaration of war. David's confident smile faltered as his pen touched the paper. The ink wouldn't flow. Interesting, James said, pulling out a small remote device. Biometric ink, Morrison. It only responds to your DNA signature when you're under duress. The more desperate you are, the more viable the signature becomes. Right now, you're feeling too hopeful. Rachel squeezed David's hand. What does that mean? It means your husband needs to be properly motivated. James pressed a button on the remote, and David's computer screen flickered to life with a live video feed. Emma and Tyler sat tied to chairs in what looked like the old Morrison Enterprises warehouse, tears streaming down their faces. Carmen stood behind them, but she wasn't the gentle housekeeper they'd known. Her face was cold, professional. "Daddy!" Emma's voice crackled through the speakers. "Help us. The lady says we can't go home until you write your name." Tyler, only 8 years old, was trying to be brave but failing. "Mommy, I'm scared. Why can't we come home?" David felt his knees buckle. Rachel made a sound like a wounded animal. "Now try the pen," James said softly. The ink flowed immediately, dark and binding. "Stop," David said, pulling his hand back. "I'll sign, but I want guarantees. Put it in writing that Emma and Tyler will be safe." James laughed. "You're not in a position to negotiate, Morrison. But I'll give you a choice. Sign the papers now, and one of your children goes free immediately. Refuse, and Carmen starts demonstrating why children should listen to adults." On the screen, Carmen moved toward Emma with something metallic glinting in her hand. "Wait!" Rachel screamed. "I'll do anything. Please don't hurt them. Anything." James's eyes lit up with predatory interest. "How convenient. Because I need you to make a choice, Rachel. David signs the papers and goes to prison, or I let Carmen get creative with the children while you watch." David grabbed Rachel's shoulders. "There has to be another way." "There is," James interrupted. "Rachel can take David's place. Sign a confession that she's been embezzling money from Morrison Enterprises to fund her gambling addiction. 25 years in federal prison, but the children live." Rachel didn't hesitate. "Where do I sign?" "No." David pulled her away from the desk. "Rachel, you can't. They're my children too, David. Emma is your daughter, but Tyler is James's son. He'll never hurt Tyler, which means Emma is the one in real danger." Rachel's voice broke. "I won't let my daughter pay for my mistakes. But Tyler needs you. Tyler needs his mother to sacrifice everything to keep his sister safe. That's what mothers do." James watched their argument with obvious satisfaction. "Touching. But you're both missing the real choice here." David turned toward him, dread pooling in his stomach. "The choice isn't who goes to prison," James continued. "It's which child lives." The video feed switched to a split screen. Emma in one frame, Tyler in the other. Carmen stood between them, now holding a gun. "You see, I've realized that keeping both children alive is complicated. Too many variables. Too many witnesses who might remember things differently as they grow up." James's voice was conversational, as if discussing the weather. "So here's what's going to happen. You choose one child to save. The other dies. Clean, simple, final." Rachel collapsed into a chair, her face white with shock. David felt the room spin around him. "That's not a choice," David said, his voice hoarse. "That's not human. Humanity is a luxury for people who aren't trying to protect family legacies," James replied coldly. "I have 15 minutes to wrap this up before my associates arrive to clean house. Choose, or I choose for you." David looked at the screen, seeing Emma's terrified face, Tyler's confused expression. "How do you choose between your children? How do you decide which life matters more?" "The girl is biologically yours," James continued helpfully. "The boy is biologically mine. That should make the choice easier." "No," Rachel said quietly. "It doesn't matter whose DNA they carry. They're both our children. Then you better decide quickly which one you love more." David felt something inside him crack, not breaking but transforming. The impossible choice was designed to destroy him, to leave him broken regardless of which path he chose. But James had made a critical error. He'd given David and Rachel a common enemy. "There's a third option," David said slowly. "I don't think you understand the situation." "I understand perfectly." David moved to his desk, pulling out a laptop hidden in a drawer James hadn't searched. "See, 15 years ago, when Rachel first brought me James's technology, I did something paranoid entrepreneurs do. I documented everything." James's confident expression flickered slightly. "Every line of code, every algorithm, every innovation that built Morrison Enterprises, I traced it back to its source." David's fingers flew across the keyboard. "And I found something interesting about James Blackstone's patents." The office's large monitor filled with technical documents, patent filings, and code repositories. "The logistics algorithms that made us billions?" They weren't James's original work either. They were developed by a research team at MIT. A team that included a graduate student named Maria Rodriguez. Rachel gasped. Carmen's real name. Carmen Rodriguez, doctoral candidate in logistics optimization, whose research was stolen by her faculty advisor and sold to private industry. David's voice grew stronger as pieces clicked into place. The same Carmen who's been working in our house for 8 years, gathering evidence of the theft that destroyed her academic career. On the screen, the video feed showed Carmen stepping away from the children, her expression changing as she apparently heard David's words through a hidden earpiece. Carmen isn't James's ally, David continued. She's been working with federal investigators to prove that Morrison Enterprises was built on stolen intellectual property. But not stolen by me, stolen by James Blackstone. James lunged for the laptop, but David was ready. Too late. I just uploaded 15 years of evidence to a dozen servers. Patent theft, academic fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and now kidnapping and conspiracy to commit murder. The video feed showed Carmen removing Emma and Tyler's restraints, gathering them protectively behind her. The children are safe, Carmen's voice came through the computer speakers. And the FBI will be here in approximately 3 minutes. James pulled out a gun, his carefully constructed plan crumbling around him. You think you're so clever, Morrison, but you've forgotten something crucial. What's that? Rachel still committed crimes. She still stole technology, falsified documents, lived a lie for 15 years. Even if I go down, she goes down with me. James turned the gun toward Rachel. And I'm not going to prison alone. David stepped between them without hesitation. Then you'll have to go through me. David, no. Rachel reached for him, but James was already pulling the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the office like thunder. David felt the bullet tear through his shoulder, spinning him around. Blood splattered across the documents scattered on his desk. The confession papers, the transfer agreements, the evidence that could save or damn them all. David! Rachel caught him as he fell, her hands pressing against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Touching, James said, standing over them with the gun still pointed at David's head. But ultimately pointless. Rachel, you have 30 seconds to sign those transfer papers, or I put the next bullet somewhere more permanent. Rachel looked down at David, seeing her own desperation reflected in his eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. For the lies, for the deception, for loving you when I wasn't supposed to. Rachel, I need you to know that whatever I did wrong, whatever crimes I committed, falling in love with you wasn't one of them. She kissed his forehead gently. And our children, both of them, were the best thing we ever created together. She reached for the pen with trembling hands. Don't, David managed through gritted teeth. There's still 20 seconds, Rachel. Rachel signed her name to the confession papers, her tears mixing with David's blood on the desk. There. It's done. Let him live. James smiled coldly. I said I wouldn't put the next bullet somewhere more permanent. I never said I wouldn't put it somewhere equally fatal. He turned the gun toward Rachel. No. David tried to get up, but his wounded shoulder sent him crashing back to the floor. Goodbye, darling, James said to Rachel. Thank you for 15 years of excellent service. The office door exploded inward as federal agents flooded the room, but David knew they were too late. He could see James's finger tightening on the trigger, see Rachel closing her eyes in acceptance, see 15 years of complicated love about to end in violence. Then Carmen's voice cut through the chaos. James Blackstone, you're under arrest for patent theft, conspiracy, kidnapping, and attempted murder. James spun toward the door, giving David the split second he needed. With the last of his strength, David threw himself forward, tackling James around the legs. The gun went off again, but the bullet went wide, shattering the window behind Rachel's head. Federal agents swarmed over James, restraining him as he screamed threats and accusations. David collapsed again, his vision graying from blood loss, but he could see Rachel kneeling beside him, alive and whole. Stay with me, she whispered, her hands finding his face. David, stay with me. Our children need their father. I need my husband. Our children, David repeated, the words feeling like a prayer. Both of them, Rachel agreed. Forever. As consciousness slipped away, David heard Emma and Tyler's voices calling for Mommy and Daddy, heard federal agents reading James his rights, heard Rachel promising him that everything was going to be different now. But what he remembered most clearly, as the darkness claimed him, was the sound of Rachel calling him her husband without lies or deception for the first time in 15 years. And for one perfect moment, despite everything that had been broken, their family felt whole. In the darkest hour, when all seemed lost, David and Rachel found something they'd been missing for years: the truth. But with David critically wounded and their empire in ruins, can love alone rebuild what was destroyed? The final confrontation awaits, and some victories come at the highest price. ***. David woke up in a hospital bed with tubes in his arms and Rachel's hand in his. Through the haze of painkillers, he could see Emma and Tyler curled up asleep in chairs beside the window, their faces peaceful for the first time in days. "How long?" he whispered. 3 days, Rachel said softly. "The bullet missed your major arteries, but you lost a lot of blood." Her eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion. "The doctors said you were lucky." David tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. "James? Federal custody. Charges include patent theft, conspiracy, kidnapping, attempted murder, and about 15 other felonies Carmen helped document over the past 2 years. Rachel's voice carried no satisfaction, only exhaustion. "He'll never hurt anyone again. And us." Rachel's face crumpled. "David, we need to talk about that." Before she could continue, Agent Sarah Chin entered the room, her expression professionally sympathetic. David recognized her from news coverage of white-collar crime cases, the FBI's top financial crimes investigator. "Mr. Morrison, I'm glad you're awake. We need to discuss the legal implications of your situation." David felt Rachel's hand tighten in his. "How bad is it?" "Complicated," Agent Chin said, settling into a chair. "On one hand, you were clearly victims of an elaborate 15-year conspiracy. James Blackstone and his associates orchestrated one of the most sophisticated long-term fraud schemes we've ever documented. On the other hand," Rachel asked quietly, "On the other hand, Mrs. Morrison, you did sign those confession papers. Regardless of the duress involved, you admitted to financial crimes that, technically, you did commit. You falsified documents, transferred proprietary technology without authorization, and misrepresented company assets." David's heart sank. "What does that mean?" "It means we have a choice to make," Agent Chin continued. "We can proceed with charges against Mrs. Morrison, which would likely result in 5 to 7 years in federal prison. Or, Rachel prompted. "Or you cooperate fully with our investigation, agree to forfeit all assets obtained through the fraudulent technology transfers, and accept a plea agreement that involves community service and probation instead of prison time." David felt the room spinning again, but not from blood loss this time. "All assets. Morrison Enterprises, your homes, your investment accounts, your children's trust funds. Everything built using the stolen algorithms would be subject to forfeiture." Agent Chen's voice was gentle but implacable. "You'd essentially be starting over with nothing." Rachel let go of David's hand, standing and walking to the window where their children slept. "What about Emma and Tyler? What happens to them?" "They'd remain in your custody, assuming you accept the plea agreement. But you'd be responsible for rebuilding your lives from scratch." David stared at the ceiling, processing the magnitude of what they faced. 15 years of wealth gone. The business empire they'd built dissolved. Their children's college funds, their retirement savings, their financial security, all of it would disappear. "There's something else," Agent Chin added quietly. "The plea agreement requires complete honesty about the nature of your marriage, including testimony about the deception involved. The media attention will be significant." David understood. Not only would they lose everything material, but their private pain would become public spectacle. Emma and Tyler would grow up knowing their parents' marriage had been built on lies and manipulation. The whole world would know. "How long do we have to decide?" Rachel asked. 48 hours. After Agent Chin left, David and Rachel sat in silence, watching their children sleep. Finally, Emma stirred, opening her eyes and seeing her father awake. "Daddy!" She scrambled out of the chair, careful of the tubes and wires as she climbed onto the bed beside him. "Are you okay? Are we going home soon?" Tyler woke at the sound of his sister's voice, his face lighting up when he saw David conscious. "Dad, Mom said you were hurt protecting us." David's throat tightened. Tyler still called him Dad, even though the truth about his paternity was now exposed. Even though everything was falling apart around them. "I'm okay, buddy. We're all okay. When can we go home?" Emma asked. David and Rachel exchanged a look over their daughter's head. How do you explain to an 11-year-old that home might not exist anymore? That the life they'd known was about to disappear? Tyler, we need to have a family meeting, Rachel said gently. There are some things we need to talk about. For the next hour, David and Rachel tried to explain the inexplicable to their children. That sometimes adults make mistakes that have big consequences. That their family was going to face some difficult changes. That no matter what happened, their parents loved them and would take care of them. Emma, precocious and sharp, grasped the implications quickly. We're going to be poor, aren't we? We're going to have to start over, David said carefully. But we'll do it together. Tyler, younger and more trusting, just snuggled closer to David. As long as we're together, I don't care about the big house. After the children fell asleep again, David and Rachel found themselves facing the impossible choice that would define the rest of their lives. I should take full responsibility, Rachel said quietly. You were manipulated just like everyone else. I'm the one who stole the technology, who lived the lie, who... We're past that, David interrupted. Whatever you did, whatever I did, we did as partners. If we're going to lose everything, we lose it together. Rachel turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. David, do you understand what we're talking about? Not just the money, our entire life. Emma's private school, Tyler's music lessons, your father's medical bills, the foundation we built for underprivileged kids, all of it gone. David thought about his father, dying in an expensive care facility that they'd no longer be able to afford. About Emma's dreams of attending MIT like her mother. About Tyler's natural talent for piano that required lessons they couldn't provide. About the hundreds of employees who would lose their jobs when Morrison Enterprises was dissolved. There's another option, he said slowly. What? We fight it. Claim the confessions were coerced, challenge the asset forfeiture, drag this out in court for years. David's voice grew stronger. We could probably keep some of the money, maybe even save the company. At what cost? Years of legal battles. Media scrutiny. The children growing up in the middle of a public scandal. And, David paused, the weight of truth settling on him. And continuing to build our lives on stolen foundation. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? David looked at his children, sleeping peacefully despite everything that had happened. Emma had her mother's determined chin. Tyler had his gentle nature. They were good kids who deserved better than parents who chose money over integrity. I want to start over, he said finally. Clean slate. No stolen technology, no blood money, no lies between us. I want to build something real this time. Even if it means losing everything. Rachel, 3 days ago I thought I'd lost you and the kids forever. Everything else is just stuff. Rachel climbed onto the hospital bed beside him, careful of his injured shoulder. It won't be easy. Starting over at 43 with 2 children and no money. Are you saying you want to fight the charges? No, she said softly. I'm saying I love you. The real you, not the successful businessman or the wealthy entrepreneur. I love the man who threw himself between me and a gun. The man who would give up everything to protect his family. Even Tyler? Knowing he's not biologically mine. Rachel's eyes filled with fresh tears. David, Tyler is yours in every way that matters. You've been his father since the day he was born. DNA doesn't change that. David pulled her closer with his good arm. And I love you. Not the perfect corporate wife or the brilliant attorney. I love the woman who sacrificed 15 years of her life to protect her father. The woman who was willing to go to prison to save our children. They kissed then, soft and desperate, tasting salt and possibility and the strange freedom that comes from losing everything except what truly matters. So we take the plea? Rachel whispered. We take the plea. We start over. We build something real this time. Together. Together. As if sensing their parents' decision, Emma stirred in her chair. Mom. Dad. Are you okay? We're perfect, sweetheart, David said, and for the first time in years he meant it. Outside the hospital window, dawn was breaking over the city where they'd built their empire and lost their way. Soon they'd leave this place with nothing but each other, and the chance to discover who David and Rachel Morrison really were when stripped of everything but love. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was the best choice they'd ever made. Asterisk in choosing love over wealth, truth over comfort, David and Rachel Morrison have made the hardest decision of their lives. With their empire in ruins and their future uncertain, they've discovered something more valuable than money, each other. But the final test awaits as they learn whether love alone can rebuild what was destroyed. Asterisk. 6 months later. David's hands were permanently stained with grease now, A badge of honor he wore proudly as he locked up Morrison Auto Repair for the night. The converted garage in the working-class neighborhood looked nothing like the glass towers where he'd once commanded an empire. But something about the honest work of fixing things that were broken felt right in a way that moving money around never had. "Dad, did you see?" Emma burst through the shop door, waving a letter in her hand. "I got accepted to the robotics program at Jefferson High." David wiped his hands on a rag, grinning at his daughter's excitement. "Public school robotics? I thought you said that was beneath MIT prep standards." "That was before I met Mrs. Rodriguez," Emma said, her eyes shining. "Did you know she has a PhD in engineering? She's teaching kids who've never had access to advanced science programs how to build competition-level robots." "Dad, they're doing things I never learned at Westfield Academy." Through the shop's front window, David could see Rachel walking up the street from her job at the public defender's office, Tyler's hand in hers as they stopped to pet every dog they encountered. She looked tired, they all did, working longer hours for less money than they'd ever imagined. But there was something peaceful in her expression that he'd never seen during their wealthy years. "How was school today, buddy?" David asked as Tyler bounded into the shop. "Amazing. Mr. Chun, Uncle Robert's brother who teaches music, he said I have perfect pitch. And guess what? The community center is starting a youth orchestra, and they want me to be first chair piano." Tyler's excitement was infectious. He said with enough practice, I could get a scholarship to music school someday. "We keep the shop," he said, understanding flooding through him. "We keep this apartment, this life, this community. But we use the money to help other families avoid what we went through." "A foundation," Rachel said, her voice growing stronger. "The Morrison Family Foundation for Educational Justice. Dedicated to ensuring that every child has access to the kind of opportunities that were only available to the wealthy." Tyler clapped his hands excitedly. "So I could help other kids learn piano? So you could help other kids discover they have talents they never knew existed," Rachel said, pulling him into a hug. Agent Chen's voice came through the phone, warm with approval. "I think the Victims' Compensation Board would find that use of funds entirely appropriate." David sat back down at their table, looking at his family. His real family, forged through crisis and choice rather than convenience and lies. "So we stay here. We keep our jobs. We live the life we've built. But we also become the people we always should have been." "David," Rachel said softly, "are you sure? Emma's college fund, Tyler's music education, your father's medical bills, we could solve all of that." "We can solve it for everyone," David replied. "Not just our family, but every family facing the same struggles." Emma stood up suddenly, her face shining with determination. "I want to help design the robotics programs. I know what works and what doesn't from both sides now. And I want to make sure every kid who loves music gets to learn it," Tyler added. "Even if their parents can't afford it." Rachel looked at David with tears in her eyes. "When did our children become wiser than we are?" "The day we stopped protecting them from reality and started showing them how to face it," David said. 6 months ago, they had lost everything and found each other. Now they had the chance to turn their hard-won wisdom into a legacy that would outlast any business empire. "Agent Chun," David said, "we accept the compensation. But we're not coming back to the executive towers. We're staying right here in this neighborhood, doing this work. And we're going to use every penny to make sure other families never have to choose between wealth and integrity." "I think," Agent Chin said with obvious satisfaction, "that's exactly what justice looks like." As they hung up the phone, David pulled Rachel into his arms, spinning her around their tiny kitchen while Emma and Tyler laughed and cheered. They were about to become the richest family in the state again. But more importantly, they had become the people they were always meant to be. The money would come with responsibility, but this time they were ready for it. This time, they understood the difference between success and significance. This time, they were building something that could never be stolen or destroyed, a love strong enough to change the world. In the most unexpected twist of all, losing everything led David and Rachel to find their true purpose. What began as devastating loss has transformed into the greatest victory, not just for their family, but for countless others who will benefit from their hard-won wisdom. Sometimes the most valuable treasure is hidden in the ruins of what we thought we wanted. Asterisk, asterisk. 1 year later, David Morrison stood at the stove of their small apartment kitchen, flipping pancakes while morning sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked not manicured estates, but a bustling neighborhood where children walked to school and families knew each other's names. The coffee was brewing, the same brand they'd drunk in their mansion, but it tasted different now. Better somehow. Mom, you have to see this. Emma burst through the kitchen door, tablet in hand, her hair still messy from sleep. She'd grown 3 inches in the past year, but more importantly, she'd grown into herself, confident without arrogance, brilliant without condescension. Rachel emerged from their bedroom, straightening her public defender's blazer. The designer suits were gone, but she carried herself with more authority now than she ever had in boardrooms. What's got you so excited, sweetheart? The Foundation's robotics program just got featured in Scientific American. Emma's eyes shone with pride. Mrs. Rodriguez's kids from Jefferson High beat MIT's freshman team in the national competition. Look, she held up the tablet showing a photo of 8 teenagers from their neighborhood, holding a trophy bigger than any corporate award David had ever received. In the background stood Carmen Rodriguez, no longer their housekeeper, but Dr. Carmen Rodriguez, Director of STEM Education for the Morrison Family Foundation. Carmen called this morning, Rachel said, accepting a cup of coffee from David with a smile that still made his heart skip. The scholarship program just got its biggest donation yet. A tech billionaire who said our story inspired him to examine his own success. Tyler bounded in from his practice room, violin case in hand. At 9 years old, he was already performing with the community youth orchestra, but more importantly, he was teaching younger kids the basics every Saturday morning. Dad, Mr. Chin says I'm ready for the regional auditions. David ruffled his son's hair, because Tyler would always be his son, regardless of DNA, and felt that familiar surge of pure love. That's incredible, buddy. You've worked so hard. They gathered around their small breakfast table, just as they had in their mansion 18 months ago. But everything was different now. The conversation wasn't hurried or distracted. David wasn't calculating stock prices while Emma talked about school. Rachel wasn't hiding secrets behind careful smiles. Tyler wasn't competing for attention with phones and tablets. Dad, Emma said, spreading jam on her pancake with scientific precision, I've been thinking about college. David's chest tightened slightly. Emma was only 12, but her intelligence had always put her years ahead academically. Oh, I want to stay in public school through graduation. Then I want to go to a state university for engineering. She looked up at him with Rachel's determined eyes. I want to understand what it's like for kids who don't have trust funds and connections. How can I design programs for them if I don't understand their world? Rachel reached across the table to squeeze their daughter's hand. Emma, you don't have to choose the harder path to prove anything. I'm not trying to prove anything, Mom. I'm trying to become someone who can actually help people. Emma's voice carried wisdom that made David's throat tight. Rich people helping poor people from far away doesn't really work. You have to understand the problems from the inside. Tyler nodded seriously. Like how Dad learned to fix cars by actually getting his hands dirty, not just reading about engines. David felt tears prick his eyes. His children understood something it had taken him 43 years to learn. Authenticity couldn't be purchased or performed. It had to be lived. Speaking of which, Rachel said, checking her watch, I have a court hearing at 9. The Patterson case. Remember the family whose landlord wouldn't fix their heating? The one you've been working on for 6 months? David asked. The judge ruled in their favor yesterday. Full rent reimbursement, mandated repairs, and the landlord has to pay their legal fees. Rachel's smile was fierce with satisfaction. Mrs. Patterson cried in the courtroom. She said it was the first time anyone had ever fought for her family. David understood that feeling. For the first time in his life, his work mattered beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. Yesterday, a 16-year-old girl had come to thank him for the automotive training program that had given her a summer job and college savings. Last week, a mother had hugged Rachel for getting her custody of her children back from an abusive ex-husband. They were changing lives in ways that building a business empire never had. The kitchen phone rang, the old landline they'd installed because this neighborhood still believed in community connections. David answered, recognizing the voice of Dr. Patricia Wells, the Foundation's executive director. David, I have news about James. Everyone at the table went quiet. James Blackstone was serving 25 years in federal prison, but his name still cast shadows over their family. What kind of news? He wants to see you. He's been working with prosecutors to uncover other victims of intellectual property theft. He's trying to make amends. David looked at Rachel, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. They'd built their new life by moving forward, not looking back. Does he want something from us? He wants to donate his remaining personal assets to the foundation. Everything not seized by the government, about $50 million. Dr. Wells paused. He also wanted me to tell you that Tyler's college fund has been fully established. Anonymous donation, but the paperwork came from his attorney. Tyler looked up from his breakfast, confused. Who's James? David and Rachel had never told the children the full truth about Tyler's paternity. In their new life built on honesty, this remained their one protective lie. Someone who hurt our family but is trying to make it right, Rachel said carefully. Should we forgive him? Tyler asked with the serious consideration only children could bring to impossible questions. David thought about forgiveness, not the easy kind that costs nothing, but the hard kind that changes you. I think we should let him try to earn it. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust, buddy. We can hope he becomes a better person without forgetting the harm he caused. Sounds fair, Tyler said, returning to his breakfast as if they'd been discussing the weather. Emma studied her parents with keen intelligence. There's more to this story than you're telling us. There always is, sweetheart, Rachel said gently. But some stories belong to adults until children are ready to understand them. Will you tell us when we're older? Everything, David promised. When you're old enough to understand that good people can make terrible choices, and that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things we become. As they finished breakfast, David's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chun. Blackstone case officially closed. 47 victims compensated. 6 copycat operations shut down. You started something bigger than you know. David showed the message to Rachel, who smiled with quiet satisfaction. They'd lost everything and found themselves. Then they'd use their second chance to help others avoid the same traps that had nearly destroyed them. The apartment door opened, and Carmen Rodriguez entered with her usual cheerful energy. She'd become family over the past year. Not as an employee, but as a friend whose brilliant mind was finally being recognized for its true worth. Ready for the big announcement? She asked, pulling out her tablet. Today, the Morrison Family Foundation was launching its latest initiative, a nationwide program providing free legal aid, technical education, and business mentorship to families affected by corporate fraud. They'd partnered with 50 universities, 200 schools, and countless community organizations. We're calling it Second Chances, Carmen explained, showing them the promotional materials. Because everyone deserves the opportunity to rebuild their lives with integrity. David looked around their small kitchen at the people who had become his real wealth. Rachel, whose love had survived the worst possible betrayal and emerged stronger. Emma and Tyler, who were growing into humans he genuinely admired. Carmen, whose friendship had taught them that trust could be rebuilt after devastating breaches. Outside their window, he could see the neighborhood coming to life. Kids walking to school, neighbors helping neighbors, families who knew that success wasn't measured in square footage or stock portfolios. 18 months ago, Rachel had said she wanted a divorce at a breakfast table that cost more than most people's cars. Today, she reached across a table they'd bought secondhand and took his grease-stained hand in hers. I love you, she said simply. I love you too, he replied, meaning it in ways he'd never understood before. They'd saved their marriage by losing everything else. They'd found their fortune by giving it all away. They'd discovered their true selves by being stripped of everything they thought defined them. And in a world that often seemed broken, they were helping other families find their own second chances at happiness, integrity, and love. Ready to change the world today? Rachel asked, standing and kissing his forehead. Together, David replied. Always together. As they left for work, Rachel to her courtroom battles for justice, David to his garage where broken things became whole again. Emma and Tyler gathered their backpacks for school, chattering about robotics competitions and orchestra practice, and all the beautiful ordinary dreams that money couldn't buy but love could nurture. The Morrison family had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that losing everything can sometimes be the only way to find what truly matters. And what truly mattered was walking out the door together, ready to face whatever came next. What did this story teach you about the difference between success and significance? Sometimes we have to lose everything we think we want to discover what we actually need. Love, integrity, and purpose can't be purchased. They can only be earned through the choices we make when everything else falls away. Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world. ****. The emotional journey is complete, taking David and Rachel Morrison from devastating betrayal to profound transformation. proving that sometimes the greatest victories come disguised as the most crushing defeats.